Do vampires live among us, or are they just an afterthought of evil men that deserve to be called monsters? Today we go over Peter Kurten, the vampire of Dusseldorf.
Ladies and gentlemen of all ages, boys and girls, thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Angry Meat Production. We appreciate you coming in and letting us be a part of your lives week in and week out. We hope to do our best to present you with something that your eardrums delight in. Whether you're looking at us on YouTube or Rumble, or listening to us on Spotify, Google, or Anchor, or any of the other podcast services that we are currently on or trying to get on. We thank you. And if you don't mind, at the end of every episode, stop by, leave us a comment, leave us a like. If it asks for 5 stars, we'll take 5 stars, even if you don't like us. 5 stars are what it's all about. With that being said, we hope you enjoy our attempt to make our advocation our vocation. Ladies and gentlemen, let the games begin.
Welcome, Angry Faithful. Yes, today we are going over Peter Kurten. He was a German serial killer back in 19... Well, he was found out about 1931, but he pretty much killed even in his younger years, or supposedly. There's a lot known about this guy, but there is also a lot that is speculation. But let's get started. During his childhood, Peter Kurten was born in a poverty-stricken, abusive family in Mulheim, Rhin on May 26, 1983, the oldest of 13 children, 2 of whom died of early age. Kurten's parents were both alcoholics who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. And Kurten's father frequently beat his wife and children, particularly when he was drunk. When intoxicated, Kurten's father often forced his wife and children. Often forced his wife and children to assemble before him, before ordering his wife to strip naked and having sex with him as his children watched. Yeah, that's not gonna meld good as a messed up childhood. He was jailed for 18 months in 1897 for repeatedly raping his eldest daughter, who at the age of 13, shortly thereafter, Kurten's mother obtained a separation order and later remarried and relocated to Dusseldorf. In 1888, Kurten attempted to drown one of his playmates. 4 years later, he befriended a local dog catcher who lived in the same building as his family and began accompanying him. Anyways, sorry. Got sidetracked. Befriended a local dog catcher and began accompanying him on his rounds. This individual often tortured and killed the animals he caught, and Kurten soon became an active and willing participant in the torture of animals. Being the eldest surviving son, Kurten was the target of much of his father's physical abuse and frequently refused to return home from school as a result. Although he was a good student, he later recalculated his academic performance, suffering due to his extensive physical violence he endured. From the early age, Kurten often ran away from home for periods of time, ranging from days to weeks. Much of time Kurten spent on the streets was in company of petty criminals and social misfits. Via these accomplices, Kurten was introduced to various forms of petty crime, which he initially committed as the means of feeding and clothing himself when living on the streets. Kurten later claimed that he committed his first murder at the age of 9 when he pushed a school friend who he knew was unable to swim off a log raft. When a second boy attempted to save the drowning youngster, Curtin held his head underneath the water, so both boys drowned. Both deaths were ruled by authorities to be an accident. At the adolescence of at the 13, Curtin formed a relationship with a girl at his age, and although she allowed Curtin to undress and follow her, she would resist any attempts he made to engage in intercourse. To relieve his sexual urges, Kurten resorted to acts of bestiality. God, what is with Germans and they're young? Having sex with, it says he had sex with sheep, pigs, goats in the local stables, but later claimed he attained the greatest sense of ejaculation if he had actually stabbed these animals just before his active orgasm. Oh my God. Jesus. Fuck. Thus, he began stabbing and slashing animals and increased his freaking active orgasms. Though he was admitted this behavior ended when he observed stabbing a pig, he also attempted to rape the same sister his father earlier molested. God, that child, that little girl. Oh man, I I hope she was like front row to see him murdered. Or executed. We'll get to that later. In 1897, Curtin left school at his father's assist to obtain employment as an apprentice molder. This apprenticeship lasted for 2 years before Curtin stole all the money he could find in the household, plus apparently 300 marks from his employer. He ran away from home and relocated to Kolpanies, where he began a brief relationship with a prostitute 2 years his senior, whom he claimed willingly submitted to every form of sexual perversion he demanded of her. He was apprehended just 4 weeks later and charged with breaking, entering, and theft, and subsequently sentenced to 1 month imprisonment. He was released from prison in August 1899 and reverted to his life of petty crime he had lived before his arrest. Now, I'm curious about a apprentice molder. What is that? Uh, uh, so works in the shipyard foundry, one of the few foundries in the United States capable of pouring large amount of. Let's see here. Oh, okay. They just make molds and pour molted steel or any metal into molds. So that was his job, basically. Like if you need a steel beam or stuff like that, and they mold it and with the steel, and that's what his apprenticeship was. His first attempt to murder, Cullerton claimed that he had committed his first murder in November 1988, 1899, sorry. In his 1930 confession to investigators, Curtin claimed that he picked up an 18-year-old girl, Ostraby. Let's get the speaking spell, see if they can get this one, because it's a weird.
Alistry.
It's just strange to me because it's German and I don't speak German. And persuaded her to accompany him to Hafengarten, where he claimed that to have engaged in sex with the girl before strangling her into unconsciousness. With his bare hands before leaving the scene, believing her to be dead. No compromising records exist to corroborate Kurt's claim. If this attack did take place, the victim likely survived this assault. Nonetheless, Curtin later stated that Via his committing this act, he had proven to himself his great height the sexual ecstasy could only be achieved in this manner. Shortly after, in the 1900s, Kurten was arrested for fraud. He was also rearrested later in the same year for the same charges, although this second occasion's charge penalty to his 1899 Dusseldorf theft, plus an attempt to murder of the girl with a firearm, were added to the indictment. Currently, Kurten was sentenced for 4 years in prison. In October 1900, he served this sentence in Durendorf, through a brought of Dusseldorf. I, my dyslexia is coming there.
Borough.
Oh, Borough of Dusseldorf. Released in the summer of 1904, Kurten was drafted into the Imperial German Army. He was deployed in the city of Metz in Lorton. Let's see here. Lorton.
Lorraine.
Oh, Lorraine. To serve in the 98th Infantry Regiment, although soon deserted, that alum, Kurten had committed acts of arson, which he would discredit, which from the distance as emergency services attempt, which he was discreditedly watch from a distance as emergency services attempted to extinguish the fire. The majority of these fires were in barns and haylofts, and Kurten would admit to police that he committed around 24 acts of arson upon his arrest in New Year's Eve. He also fully admitted these fires had been committed both for his sexual excitement and in the hopes of the burning sheep tramps alive. Wow. God, he's just all kinds of messed up. As a result of his desertion, Kurten was tried by the military court and convicted of desertion in the addition to multiple counts of arson, robbery, and attempted robbery. Later charges were pinned to acts he had committed that year, and was subsequently imprisoned from 1905 to 1913. Kurten served his sentence in Munster, with which of his time spent solitary, he was in solitary confinement for repeatedly instance of insubordination. He would later claim to investigators and psychologists that this period of his incarceration was that in which he expand his including graphic fantasies he's striking out at society and killing masses of people. These fantasies become ever more prominent and overbearing in his mind. Kurten later claimed he deserved the sort of pleasure from these victims that other people would get from thinking about naked women, adding an occasionally spontaneous ejaculating while pre-acquired with such thoughts. Ugh. Now, going on to the murders. His first murder, Kurten definitely committed according to May 25th, 1913, during the course of a burglary at a tavern in Mulham am Rhein. He had encountered a nine-year-old girl named Christina Klin asleep in her bed. Kurten strangled the child, then slashed her twice across the throat with a pocket knife, ejaculating as he heard the blood dripping from the womb onto the floor by her bed and on his hand. Oh God, Lord. Yeah, some of these guys, you just want to pull a bullet in their head as soon as possible. The following day, Kurten specifically returned to Colin to drink in the tavern located directly opposite that which he would murdered Klin. So that he could listen to the locals react to the child's murder. He would later recollect to investigators that he deserved an extreme sense of gratification from general disgust, repulsion, and outrage he had heard from the patrons in the conversation. Moreover, in the weeks followed Clinton's funeral, Kurten's occasionally traveled to Mulham and Rhein to visit the child's grave, adding to which he handed the soil covered the grave and spontaneously ejaculated. Jesus. 2 months later, again in the course of committing burglary with the aid of a skeleton key, Kurten broke into the home of in Dusseldorf, discovering a 17-year-old named uh, Gertrude. Let's just speak and spell this. I don't.
Gertrude Franken.
Gertrude Franken. Okay, just making sure. Asleep in her bed, Curtin manually strangled the girl and ejaculated straight on the blood sprouting around her mouth. Before leaving the crime scene. Jesus. Baby Jesus, save me from this evil. Curtin managed to escape from the scene of the attempted murder and the earlier murder of Clinton undetected. In prison and release. Just days after the attempted murder of Franklin on July 14th, Curtin arrested in a series of arson attacks and burglaries. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, although his repeated insurance and his insubordination while in prison saw him incarcerated extended for 2 years. Curtin served this sentence in the military prison in the town of Brigg, then part of Journey Empire. Released in April 1921, Curtin relocated to Altenburg, where he initially lived with his sister. Though his sister, Curtin, became acquainted with a woman 3 years his senior named Augustine Chernoff.
August Scharf.
August Sharp, a sweet shop proprietor and former prostitute who previously been convicted of shooting her fiance to death, and to whom Kurten initially posed as a former prisoner of war. 2 years later, Kurten and Schaff married, although the couple regularly engaged in sex. Kurten later admitted he could confiscate his marriage only by fantasizing about committing violence against other individuals. Gee, baby Jesus, save me from this evil. And that after their wedding night, he engaged in intercourse with his wife only at her invitation. For the first time in his life, Curtin obtained regular employment, also became an active trade union official. Although with the exception of his wife, he formed no close friendships. In 1925, he returned to with Schaefer to Dusseldorf, where he soon began an affair with a servant girl named Trend and a housemaid named Murch. Both women were frequently subject to particular strangulations when they submitted to intercourse, with Trend being informed by Curtin. That's what love means. Ooh, God, strangulation means love. No, it doesn't. When his wife discovered his infidelity, Trent reported Curtin to the police, claiming he had seduced her. Murch alleged Curtin had raped her. The more serious charges was later dropped, although Trent's allegations were pursued, thus earning Curtin a 8-month prison sentence for seduction and threatening behavior. What? Wow. Wow. Okay. That weird laws in other countries. You can be arrested for seduction. Although he was a piece of shit, but still. Curtin served 6 months of his sentence, with his early release being upon the conditions that he left Dusseldorf. He later successfully appealed the ruling that he relocate from the city. Excuse me, real quick. Gotta wet my palate. On February 3rd, 1929, Curtin stalked a middle-aged woman, Alfatina Kahn, waiting until Kahn was shielded from the view of potential witnesses by bushes. Curtin pounced on her, grabbing her by the lapel of her coat and shouting words, "No row, don't scream." Okay, that's a new one. I mean, before dragging her to the nearby underground, where he proceeded to stab her 24 times with a sharp pair of scissors. Although many of the blows were inflicted so deeply that the scissor struck bone, Khan survived her injuries. On February 8th, Kurten strangled a 9-year-old girl named Rosa Olger. Olger? Let's find out. Stephen Hawking's.
Alliger,
Alliger. Into unconsciousness before stabbing her in the stomach, temples, and genitals and heart with a pair of scissors. Spontaneously ejaculating as he knifed the child. Oh God. He inserted his Oh dear God. He inserted his semen into her vagina with his fingers. Curtin then made a rudimentary effort to hide Olga's body by dragging it beneath the hedges before returning to the scene with a bottle of kerosene several hours later and setting the child's body ablaze. Achieving an orgasm at the sight of the flames. Olga's body was found beneath the hedges the following day. 5 days later, on February 13th, Curtin's murdered a 45-year-old mechanic and named Rudolf Scheer in the suburbs of Fulg North. Let me speak and spell this.
Flynn the Nord,
Flynn Denor, stabbing him 20 times, particularly about the head, back, and eyes. Following the discovery of Shear's body, Curtin returned to the scene of the murder to converse with the police, falsifying information. Informing one detective he had heard the murder via telephone. Despite the difference in age and sex of the three victims, the fact that all three crimes had been committed in the Flangling district of Dusseldorf at dusk, that each victims had received a multiple stab wounds likely inflicted in rapid succession and invariably involving at least one wound to the temple, plus the absence of a common motive such as robbery, led investigators to conclude the same proprietor had committed all these attacks. Furthermore, this seemingly random succession of these victims led criminologists to remark the abnormal natures of the predator. Although Curtin did attempt to strangle 4 women between March and July 1929, one of whom had claimed to have thrown into a Ren River. He not knowingly to have killed any further victims between August 11th, when he raped, strangled, and repeatedly stabbed a young woman named Mara Hanna. Curtin had first encountered Hannah, whom he described as a girl looking for marriage, on August 8th, and had arranged to take her on a date to Netterdorf, district of Dusseldorf, the following Sunday. After several hours in Han's company, Curtin lured her into a meadows in order to kill her. He later admitted Hannah had repeatedly pleaded with him to to spare her life as a alternative strangling her, stabbing her in the chest and head, and set astride her body, waiting for her to die. Hannah died approximately 1 hour after Curtin had begun attacking her. Fearful for his wife might connect the blood stain she had noted on his clothing with Hannah's murder. Curtin later buried her body in a cornfield, only to be returned to her body several weeks later, with the intent of nailing her decomposed remains to a tree and mocking the crucifixion to shock and disgust the public. Jesus Christ. However, Hans' remains proved to be too heavy for Curtin to complete this act. and he simply returned her corpse to her grave before embracing and caressing the decomposing body as he lay beneath her remains. He then reburied Hannah's body, according to Kurten later's confessions. Both before and after, he had an attempt to impel Hannah's corpse into a tree. He went to the grave many times, keeping improving it. Every time I thought of what was lying there and filled with satisfaction. 3 months after Curtin had murdered Hannah, he posted an anonymous letter to the police in which he confessed to the murders, adding that her remains had been buried into a field. In this letter, Curtin also drew a crude map describing the location of the remains. This letter would prove sufficient details to enable investigators to locate Hannah's remains on November 15th. Following the Hannah murder, Curtin changed his choice of weapons from scissors to a knife in an pregnant efforts to convince police more than one perpetrator was responsible for the unfolding crime spree. In the early morning of August 21st, he randomly stabbed a 18-year-old, a 30-year-old man, a 37-year-old woman in separate attacks. All three serious wounded, and all stated to police their assailant had not spoken a word to them before he attacked them. 3 days later, at a fairground in the suburbs of Finn, Curtin observed two foster sisters, 5 and 14, walking in the fairgrounds through adjacent annulments en route to their home, sending the older girl, Lucy Linson, on an errand to purchase cigarettes for him upon the promise of being given 20 pennies. It's epiphany, but it's in German, so it's just pennies. Curtin lifted the youngster, Gertrude Haltrumer, off the ground by her neck and strangled her into unconsciousness before cutting her throat and discarding her body in the patch of runner's beans. What is runner's beans? Is a plant loom family. Another common butter beans. I'll look up it later. When Lessons returned to the scene, Curtin particularly strangled her before stabbing her in the torso, with one wound piercing her undrolata. Undrolata is the main and largest artery in the human body, originating from the left ventricle of the heart. He also bit and twice bit. Sorry, I'm talking too much. He also bit and twice cut her throat before sucking blood from a wound. Neither girl had been sexually assaulted, and the fact only Linson footprints were found within 7 meters of her body suggests she may have attempted to flee from attacker before the collapsing. The following day, Curtin accosted a 27-year-old housemaid named Gertrude Stolten, whom he openly asked to engage in sex with him. Upon being rebuffed, Curtin shouted, "Well, then die." No, well, die then. Sorry. Before repeatedly stabbing the woman in the head, neck, shoulder, back, Soldier survived her injuries, although she was unable to provide investigators with a description for her assailant beyond assuming that he was around 40. Curtin attempted to murder two further victims, one by strangulation, other by stabbing in September, before opting to presumably use a hammer in his murders. The hammer attacks on the eve of September 30th, Curtin engaged a 31-year-old servant girl named Ida Reuter at Dusseldorf station. He successfully persuaded Rooms to accompany to a cafe, then for a walk through the local Hofgarten, close to the Ren River. At this location, he repeatedly struck her about in the head with a hammer both before and after he had raped her. At one stage in the this assault, Reuter regained consciousness, began pleading for her life to be spared. In response, Kurten simply gave her another hammer blow on the head and misused her. Wow. Okay. 11 days later, on October 11th, he encountered a 22-year-old servant girl named Elizabeth Doyer outside a theater. He had been casing as had been the case. Reuter Doers agreed to accompany Kurter for a drink at a cafe before the pair took a train to Graffendorf. Graffen? Hold on. Speak and spell. Yeah, we do this a lot.
Grafenberg.
Grafenberg. With the view will walk alongside the Chris Klaus Dussel. That's a small little river too, if you actually look at it.
Kleindussel River.
Kleindussel River, where she was struck once across her right temple with a hammer, then raped. Cross struck her repeatedly about with the hammer and both temples with the hammer. And left her for dead. Dora was found in a coma at 6:30 a.m. The following morning, she died from her injuries in the following day. On October 25th, Kurten attacked two women with a hammer. Both survived, although in the second instance, they may have been because Kurten's hammer broke in the attack. November 7th, 1929, Kurten encountered a 5-year-old girl named Gertrude Abernheim in Flingerner district of Dusseldorf. He persuaded the child to accompany him to a section of the deserted almond, where he seized her by the throat and strangled her, stabbing her once in the front temple with a pair of scissors as per the Manus de Grande. His motive. When Aberman collapsed to the ground with a sound, Kurten stabbed the child 34 times in the temple and chest before piercing her body in a pile of nettles, close to a factory wall. Okay. During the investigation by the late 1929, the murders committed by the individual the press had dubbed the Vampire of Dusseldorf, receiving considerable national and international attention due to the sheer savagery of the murders. The diverse background of the victims and the diversing methods in which they had been assaulted or murdered. Both the police and press theorized the separate of the assaults and murders were a work of more than one proprietor. By the end of 1929, Dusseldorf's police have received more than 13,000 letters from the public, with assurance from the surrounding police force, each lead to painstakingly pursued. As a result of this collective investigation into the killings, more than 9,000 individuals were interviewed. 2,650 were clued painstakingly pursued, and a list of 900,000 different names were complicated upon the official potential suspect list. Correspondence. 2 days after the murder of Gertrude Aberman, a local communist, communist? No, that's communist. Is it? Yeah, communist newspaper received a map revealing the location of the grave of Motorhana. In this drawing, Kurten had revealed precisely where he had left Aberman's body, which had been found earlier that day. describing the exact position of her corpse, which he stated could be found face down amongst bricks and rubble. And I'm gonna have to speak and spell this, and it's a simple word I can actually say.
Analysis.
Analysis. God, being dyslexic and talking at the same time is really hard sometimes. Analysis of the handwriting revealed the author was the same individual who anonymously informed police in a letter dated October 14th that he killed Hannah and buried her body at the edge of the woods. Each of the three letters Kurten had thus far sent to newspapers and police describing it as exploits and threatened further assaults and murders when examined by a graphologist. A graphologist is a person that analyzes handwriting and attempts to determine someone's personality traits. Who conform the individual had written each letter, thus leading Ernest Grant, chief inspector of the Berlin police, to conclude that one man was responsible for most of all separate of the assaults and murders. During his arrest, although Kurten was not at home when Bolling and Garland searched his property, he spotted the pair in a communal hallway and promptly left, knowing that his identity was known to the police and suspected they also have connected him to the crimes committed by the vampire of Dusseldorf. Kurten confessed to his wife he had raped Bolduc, and that because of his previous conviction, he would receive 15 years potential penal labor. When his wife consented, he found lodging in Ausperding, district of Dusseldorf, and did not return to his home until May 23rd. Upon returning home, Kurten confessed to his wife he was the vampire of Dusseldorf. He urged his wife to collect a simple reward separating offered by his capture. Augustine Kurten contacted the police the following day and the informant provided to the detectives. Kurten's wife explained that although she had known her husband to be repeatedly imprisoned in the past, she was unaware of his culpability in any murder. She then added that her husband had confessed to her of his culpability in the Dusseldorf murders, and that he was willing to likewise confess to the police. Furthermore, he was to meet her outside St. Rauch Church later that day. That afternoon, Kurten was arrested at gunpoint. Kurten freely admitted his guilt and all the crimes police had attributed to the vampire of Dusseldorf, and further confessed he had committed the unsolved murder of Christine Klein and the attempted murder of Gertrude Franken in 1913. In total, Kurten admitted to 68 crimes, including 9 murders and 31 attempted murders. He had made no attempt to excuse his crimes, but justified them upon the basis of what he saw as a injustice he had endured throughout his life. Needlessly to say, he had admitted he had not tortured any of his children victims, thank God, even though he killed them and raped them and did he tortured them. Even after death, he tortured. He's a piece of shit. He's a shit bump. Okay. He admitted to both investigators and psychologists that that the actual sight of his victim's blood was on many occasions supplemented bringing him to orgasm, and that on occasion he would experience ejaculation in the acts of strangling a woman. He would immediately become apologetic to his victims, proclaiming that's what love is all about. That's not apologetic. That's just being a shitbag. He further claimed to have drank the blood from their throats of one victim from the temple of another and licked the blood of his third victim's hands. And the Han murder, he had drank so much blood from the neck wound, he he had vomited. Kurten also admitted to having decapitated a swan in the spring of 1930 in order to drink the blood from the animal's neck and achieving ejaculation in the process. During the trial on April 13th, 1931, Peter Kurtz stood trial in Dusseldorf. He was charged with 9 counts of murder and 7 of attempted murder, and was tried before prestigious judge Dr. Rose. Kurten pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity to each of the charges, aside from when delivering his testimony. Kurten would spend the duration of his trials surrounded by heavily guarded, heavily guarded, shoulder-high iron cage specifically constructed to protect him from attack by an enraged relatives of his victims. And his feet were shackled whenever he was inside the cage. The proceedings began with the prosecution formally reciting each of the charges against Kurten. Before they recited the formal confession he had provided to police following his arrest, when then asked by the presiding judge to describe why he continued to commit the acts of arson throughout 1929 and 1930, Kurten explained, "When my desires for injuring people awoke, the love of setting fire to things awoke as well. The sight of flames excited me, but above all, it was the excitement of the attempt to extinguish the fire, and the aggregation of those who saw the property being destroyed." Having first claimed that his initial confession had been delivered to simply allow his wife to recoup the reward money offered for the capture of the Dusseldorf vampire, several days into his trial, Kurten instructed his defense attorney that he wished to change his plea to one of guilty. Addressing the court, Clayton proclaimed, "I have no remorse as to whenever recollection of my deeds make me feel ashamed. I truly tell you that thinking back to all the details is not at all unpleasant. Rather enjoyed it." Further pressed as to whether he considered himself possessed a conscience, Kurten started, "I do not." Nonetheless, when pressed as to his motivation and confession, Kurten retaliated. Sorry, speaking spell.
Reiterated.
I knew the word. My brain was not working. "Why don't you understand that I am fond of my wife, and I still am fond of her? I've done many wrong things, have been unfaithful over and over again. My wife has never done anything wrong. Even when she heard of my many prison sentences I have served, she said, 'I won't let you down, otherwise you'll be lost altogether.' I wanted to fix my wife a carefree old age. I wanted to fix for my wife a carefree old age." Lazy alone his wife. Upon cross-examination, Kurten's defense attorney, Dr. Alex Weiner, and that's how it's been, W-E-H, Weiner. I think it's Weiner, not Weiner.
Wenner.
Weiner. It's Winner. Okay. Did change three's expert conclusions, arguing the sheer range and perversion his client engaged in and was mounted to insanity. However, each doctor and psychologist remained adamant as to Kurten's being legally sane and responsible for his action. And further his attempt to discredit the validation of many of the charges recited at the opening stages of the trial, Warner also questioned whether the occasional physical inaccuracies of the crime described to his client's confessions equal to Kurten having been fabricated in at least some of the crimes. Thus supporting his content, Kurten possessed a diseased mind. In response, Dr. Berg concluded that sections of Kurten's confessions were false, but argued that the knowledge he possessed of the murder scenes and the wounds inflicted upon his victims left him in no doubt to be as guilty. And the Meyer establishment in his confession could obtain attributed to Kurten's narcissistic personality. The trial lasted 10 days. In April 22nd, the jury retired to consider their verdict. They deliberated for under 2 hours before reacting their verdict. Kurten was found guilty and sentenced to death on 9 counts of murder. He was also found guilty of 7 counts of attempted murder. Kurten displayed no emotion as the scene was passed. Although his final address to the court, he stated that he now saw his crimes as being a ghastly, that he did not want to make any sort of excuse for them. Kurten did not lodge an appeal of his convictions, although he submitted a petition for pardon to the Ministry of Justice, who was a known opponent to capital punishment. The petition was formally rejected on July 1st. Kurten remained composed upon receipt of the news and asked for permission to see his confessor, to write a letter of apology to the relatives of his victims, and finally a farewell letter to his wife. All requests were granted. Oh, this just reminds me of Albert Fish, where he wrote a letter to one of the victims. He's like, "Hey, sorry I killed your daughter, but just to let you know, didn't rape her. I tortured her, mangled her body, but I didn't rape her or did anything sexually to her body." It just baffles the mind how evil people like this think. It just makes me feel a little bit better. I'm never going to be able to do this stuff. This stuff just disgusts me that much. His execution on the evening of July 1st, 1931, Kurten received his last meal. He ordered winter schnitzels, a bottle of white wine, and fried potatoes. Kurten ate the entire meal before requesting a second helping, which the prison staff decided to grant his request. At 6 o'clock in the morning of July 2nd, Kurten was beheaded by a guillotine. You don't hear that anymore. In the grounds of Copeland Plaza Prison Coolidge. Oh, is it Coolidge?
Cologne.
Oh, Cologne. Sorry, mispronunciation. His executioner was Carl Gruber. He walked unassisted to the guillotine, flanked by the prison psychologist and physician, and a priest. Shortly before his head was placed in the guillotine, Kurten turned to the physician and asked the question, "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stumps of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures." When he asked whether he had any last words to say, which I think that was his last words, Currently gently smiled and replied, "No." In the aftermath, Kurten's 1931 execution, his head was bisected and mummified. The brain was removed and subject to forensic analysis in an attempt to explain his personal and behavior. The examination of Kurten's brain revealed no abnormalities, and the autopsy conducting upon Kurten's body revealed that aside from having an enlarged femoris gland, Kurten had not been suffering any pain abnormal. Doing this thing and learning how to speak at times.
Abnormality.
abnormalities. Yes, I have to have the speaking skill. Tell me what it says because sometimes my brain doesn't work. The interviews Kurten's granted to Dr. Kurten Berg in 1930 and 1931 proved to be the first psychological study conducted upon a sexual serial killer. And these interviews also formed the basis of Berg's book, The Sadist, which is a book published by Kirk Berg following the confessions of Peter Kurten, and in turn his German serial killer, known both of the vampire assault and murder. Okay. Describes the whole thing. I described. Shortly after the Second World War, Kurten's head was transported to the United States and is currently displayed at the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Winston-Salem, Wisconsin. Now there's many books and TVs and media stuff. There's one called M, directed by Fritz Lang. Yeah, nothing. The Thriller in 1965, Le Vampire de Dusseldorf. Vampire Dusseldorf. Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it on this one. God, he was fucking son of a bitch. You know, I'll say that I go over a lot of. I mean, Albert Fish is probably and H.H. Holmes, but there's no ranking systems for these guys assholes. Most of them are assholes. I mean, you get just hearing them and describing the stuff and everything. I just think, God, I can't. If at any point in time, I will willingly end myself before I even try to think this was a good idea. It's just ridiculous. I have nothing on these guys. I'm just glad I'm a halfway decent person. Anyways, thank you all for listening, watching, wherever you are watching from. Hope you have a wonderful day, even though I just described the most horrible shit known to man on these things. But thank you all for at least listening and giving us a chance. Talk to you all later.